This is Eddie Hearn, Matchroom Boxing. You're watching Sporting Icons. You don't need to be anywhere else.
You know what? Sometimes the storylines in boxing are so predictable. In fact, only a few days ago, I called this particular situation, which is Frank Warren will pull the plug on his meeting with Eddie Hearn. Lo and behold, that's exactly what he's done, with the excuse of, well, Eddie Hearn has said certain things about Daniel Dubois. What do I want to meet him for? It ain't happening. Okay? Now, I don't need to do videos on what Eddie Hearn said about Daniel Dubois or what Frank Warren said about Eddie Hearn and the backwards and forwards that these guys have been having. I've covered these videos already. In fact, these videos will pop up as this video goes along, of course. And the key one will pop up at the very, very end. If you can't wait that long, just go back a day or two and you'll see various videos on this whole Daniel Dubois situation, just so you're fully up to speed. Now, him pulling the plug on the meeting with Eddie Hearn because Eddie Hearn said something about Daniel Dubois. Again, Eddie Hearn has actually retracted some of the things that he said about Daniel Dubois as well as. But it is what it is. No matter how we look at it, is it very two-faced of Eddie Hearn to say some of these things? Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay? But he's still entitled to his opinion. He's still entitled to say whatever it is that he wants to say. That his opinion was that, and it is what it is. Okay? Frank Warren getting upset because Eddie Hearn said something about Daniel Dubois, that is so two-faced. That is so two-faced. Considering when Dillian Whyte got stopped by Alexander Povetkin, what was it that Frank Warren was doing? Bearing in mind, Frank Warren, he's always been about, it's about the British fans. It's all about the Brits, this, that and the other. It ain't about the Yanks, it's about the British fans. This is Frank Warren's words, right? But yet Dillian Whyte, he gets stopped by a Russian. And there is Frank Warren trying to do a bit of a piss poor job, to be honest with you, some kind of song saying about how there's no mandatory anymore and all that kind of stuff about Dillian Whyte losing. Now, we know Frank Warren that he was happy because as of right now, in this particular situation, Dillian Whyte, first Tyson Fury, would have already been called by now, had Dillian Whyte won that fight. So Frank Warren was happy that Dillian Whyte is not going to get his opportunity against Tyson Fury for the foreseeable future. First things first, Dillian Whyte, he's got to get past Alexander Povetkin in the rematch. Then they're going to reset the whole mandatory, aren't they? So that fight is going to be quite some way off, unfortunately. Now, why is it okay for Frank Warren to gloat about Dillian Whyte, but it's not okay for Eddie Hearn to have comments about Daniel Dubois? I don't understand that. You may not agree with what Eddie Hearn said. You may not agree with what Frank Warren said about Dillian Whyte. You may agree with what Frank Warren said. You may agree with what Eddie Hearn said about Daniel Dubois. No matter which way you look at it, it is what it is. What excuse is that to not have a Joshua Buatsi versus Anthony Yarde? Things like that. Of course, this is like one of the mainstream fights that people were talking about, okay? Of course, you've got the big one, Fury and Joshua. But previously, of course, you're talking about Dillian Whyte and Daniel Dubois. Even though I said that was a bad fight for Daniel Dubois at that point. It's too early for him. People wouldn't listen. Hey, he's the real deal already. I said, no, give him time. In about a year or two, maybe we're going to have a different conversation. But right now, it's too early. You can say, well, Dillian Whyte, well, he got stopped by Alexander Povetkin. Yeah, but he was dominating that fight. Have you ever seen anybody do that to Alexander Povetkin before? You haven't. Anyway, it is what it is. Okay, that's all opinion. But the point is, why would Eddie Hearn's comments about Daniel Dubois stop a meeting from happening, but Frank Warren's comments about Dillian Whyte shouldn't stop a meeting from happening? It's very, very two-faced. Very two-faced. Now, I know that the mainstream fans, as I've already covered, are they now at risk? Is Joshua Fury at risk now? I mean, I don't know. I don't think so. The other ones, like Anthony Yarde versus Buatsi, that's probably going to be at risk. Or a Callum Johnson versus a Buatsi, that could be at risk. Daniel Dubois versus Dillian Whyte is a no-go anyway. But other fights that I want to see that maybe people aren't really talk about, such as Troy Williamson. I'd like to see him take on, say, Ted Cheeseman, for example. And quite a few other fights. There may not be mainstream fights that people are talking about, but me personally, there are still plenty of fights that I would like these guys to put on. But now they're not going to. In fact, during the whole pandemic, the lockdown situation, I was saying, it's about time these two stopped their bitching about and actually sat down, had a meeting, discussed things, and made some fights together. We start to come out of lockdown, suddenly there's talk about it happening. I'm like, great, excellent. But I knew it would just take one thing for it all to fall apart. and it happened to be Eddie Hearn's comments about Daniel Dubois. You may not agree with Eddie Hearn's comments. I don't particularly agree with some of them. Some of them, at the end of the day, he's entitled to his opinion. But ultimately, who cares? It's still just his opinion. That's all it is. It's his opinion. I think it's a little bit deeper than this. I think because now Dan Dubois is going to have to go through that whole building process and all that kind of thing. Now he's out of any kind of picture for any Matchroom versus Queensberry fight. Isn't he? There's no headline fight now, is there, currently? So even if Dillian Whyte was to beat Povetkin, Dan Dubois is not even in the equation. If Dillian Whyte was to lose to Povetkin in the rematch, Dan Dubois will still not be in the equation because he's going to be going through a building process. And Dillian Whyte ain't no comeback fight for anybody. Okay? So Dan Dubois, for right now, until he rebuilds, he's out of the picture. Who else is it that Frank Warren has got that the mainstream would be interested in? Likes of me and many of you, we can pick loads and loads of fights, okay? But mainstream, not so much. Okay, but anyway, Frank Warren pulling the plug just because Eddie Hearn said something about Dan Dubois. Oh, boo-hoo. Really, boo-hoo. It's perfectly okay for you to say what you said about Dillian Whyte, but it's not okay for Eddie Hearn to say what he said about Dan Dubois. Put your hanky back in your pocket, man. My God. Anyway, drop your thoughts below, click thumbs up, subscribe. Catch you all in the next video.